So I just went to see All the Money in the World starring Christopher Plummer, and of course the thing that everyone knows about this film is that it contains perhaps the most remarkable response to the wave of sexual harassment allegations currently shaking Hollywood, which is that when allegations surfaced against Kevin Spacey, who originally played John Paul Getty in Ridley Scott's thriller, Scott got rid of Spacey, recast the part with Christopher Plummer, reshot it and re-edited it within about 2 months, and had it ready for its planned American release date in late December. I watched it and I thought that in a different environment, one where these allegations hadn't reached critical mass and hadn't persuaded people that this was an endemic problem which we needed to do something about, you could have probably got away with having Spacey in there. I mean, Getty's a very unsympathetic character and a very mysterious character. He's cold, he's strange, you don't quite know what's motivating him. Money, yes, but there seems to be something else. If you feel uncomfortable watching Getty, good, that's what the film wants you to feel. Spacey tends to play roles like this. His talent tends towards reptilian, mysterious, creepy, unsympathetic characters, and it's probably why there hasn't been so much fuss raised about the idea of taking him out of films. I mean, when you compare him to someone like Mel Gibson or Johnny Depp, those people are still hanging on, because the average Mel Gibson or Johnny Depp film wants you to actually like those actors and the characters they play. And also those actors have been playing sympathetic hero roles for so long that people have grown up with them, and it's worth asking whether any allegation can really destroy a fondness for someone that goes back to the audience's childhood. I mean, is it even possible to act like that much of a belle?
Spent the day in bed, very happy I did, yes I spent the day in bed.
Yeah, it turns out it is. I don't want to sit here and pretend that I'm always right and that I always make the correct judgment about when it's time to cut the strings with an actor or a musician who's been accused of some terrible things. For years I used to flatter myself that I didn't need that whole is it the art or the artist question, because it was only artists that I didn't like who were accused of terrible things. I didn't like Mel Gibson, so I was pretty sort of content for him to become a Hollywood exile. Eventually, I realised that it wasn't the case that the artists that I liked were just miraculously better people. It's just that I tended not to believe allegations about artists I like. Eventually, I found myself saying that Woody Allen, well, you know, it's not technically illegal, it is a bit weird, and I suppose he was in a parental position to her when she was underage, but the other allegations have never been substantiated, and eventually you have to shake yourself and say, you know, look at you. You are dismissing a serious and credible allegation because of what? Because you really like Sleeper. It's not good enough. Stardom, you see, is all about having a contract with your audience. When you look at the early reviews for a film like Louis C.K.'s I Love You, Daddy, when it was premiered at film festivals before the allegations of sexual harassment against C.K. came out, people were saying it was great, it was a fantastic new taboo-busting comedy by one of our most brilliant comic minds. When the allegations came out, people said it was terrible. You know, Richard Brody in the New Yorker said it should never have been made. And on the surface of it, that can appear hypocritical. Surely it's the same film, right? But CK's contract with the audience had changed. Those early audiences at Toronto thought that they were watching something that was bold, that was daring, that was pushing into taboo areas and was revealing something difficult and hard to get to grips with. People who saw it afterwards saw it as an apology, or not even an apology, a refusal to admit by CK that he had done anything wrong. you'd have to acknowledge that that changes the way that you read a film. Sarah Silverman recently got a lot of good press for opening her Hulu show I Love You America with a monologue about CK, about how CK is her friend, but ultimately she does believe that he did this.
I love Louis, but Louis did these things. Both of those statements are true. So I just keep asking myself, can you love someone who did bad things? Can you still love them? I can mull that over later, certainly, because the only people that matter right now are the victims. They are victims, and they're victims because of something he did.
Cards on the table, I really like Sarah Silverman, but she has benefited from this contract with the audience in a slightly unreasonable way in the past. When I laughed at some of her dicier jokes before, I did so on an understanding that, of course, Sarah Silverman cannot be a bigot, that if she was a bigot, she wouldn't be allowed up on stage. Nowadays, that looks like a painfully naive thing to think. And I think Silverman realises that, and that's why she's changed her act recently. It is the mature thing to realise that sometimes great works of art can be made by bad people. It doesn't mean you should go up to your room and throw away every book or every DVD or every album that's been made by somebody who has something disquieting in their history. But equally, you shouldn't dismiss an allegation against someone just because they happen to have produced something you like. At the end of the day, it's an emotional response more than anything. It's to do with the question of, can you take watching this person? Can you take buying something that this person has produced? And, of course, the fact that you are buying something, you are contributing to their finances in some ways, does play a part in it. If we judge Kevin Spacey more harshly than we judge, say, Caravaggio, it's not because we think that groping someone is worse than murdering them. It's because if we go to see a film with Kevin Spacey in, we are contributing to a perception that he is still bankable, whereas Caravaggio, that guy hasn't done so much recently. Robbie Collin on Twitter pointed out that if this is a complex and uncomfortable thing to discuss, then good, it should be. It's not a 280 character thing. Is it 280 characters? I can't remember. I don't care. He mentioned Lily James, the actress who's recently starred in War and Peace and Baby Driver, and he said, you know, when he asked her about allegations against Harvey Weinstein, who produced War and Peace, and Kevin Spacey, who starred in Baby Driver, she didn't really have a concrete answer about how she felt about that, which is good. She has every right to feel proud of being part of what's been hailed as the definitive adaptation of one of the greatest novels ever written. She has every right to be proud of having a major role in a critically acclaimed blockbuster by an interesting director. It's just that, if we're honest, those accomplishments now feel a bit tarnished, through no fault of her own, but it's a difficult set of feelings to be working through, and it's fine not to have the answer yet. It's not about right or wrong, it's about finding a way through the weeds for yourself, and occasionally you'll come to a point that you just can't get past. For me, that came when I went to see the recent BFI reissue of Roman Polanski's Tess, an adaptation of Tess of the D'Urbervilles that I believe is one of his greatest and most underappreciated films. About a third of the way through it, I suddenly realised, oh yeah, this book has a rape scene in. And I realised in that moment that had I remembered this before I paid for my ticket, I might not have gone to see this. Tess is, I believe, the first film Polanski made after charges were issued against him. It is set in Britain, but it is shot in France because he couldn't go to Britain in case it extradited him to the US. It stars Natasha Kinski, who Polanski was then in a relationship with. She was a teenager. Polanski had to get permission for the relationship from her father, Klaus Kinski, who abused his daughters. So there's a whole pile of really horrible stuff going on here. And like I say, if I'd remembered that this film had involved a rape scene, I would not have wanted to see this man at this point in his life film it. But I watched it and I thought, this is actually quite sensitive. And Chinatown, too, his most celebrated film, revolves around a portrayal of abuse that recognises that it is awful. And you think, how can Roman Polanski, a man who appears to utterly lack compassion for real-life flesh and blood women, treat fictional women so well? Perhaps the depiction of Faye Dunaway's character in Chinatown is to do with the film's screenwriter, Robert Towne. Perhaps the sympathetic depiction of Tess in the film of that name is to do with Thomas Hardy's novel. Perhaps, but ultimately Polanski is the director. He did have creative control over these films. Had he wanted to turn them into apologetics for his own sexual abuse, he could have done so and no one would have stopped him. But he didn't, and it still fascinates me that he didn't. I think one lesson we can take from this is that if we believe that art can change people, and if we believe that art can make people better and change people's thinking for the better, sometimes we may have to acknowledge that it can change artists themselves for the better. Or we could say that, a film is made up of a lot of people. Some of them may be bad, but a lot of them may be good as well. Which is part of why I want to try watching Baby Driver again. It's one of my favourite films of last year, and I would like to think that the fact that it has a supporting role for Kevin Spacey is not going to get in the way that much. And if it does, I'll just follow Ridley Scott's lead and sellotape a picture of Christopher Plummer over the screen whenever Spacey's on. I mean, that works.